This video was brought to you by our Patreon backers like Ian B. Find out more and support the channel by clicking the link below. So, Sweden is currently living through a bit of a political crisis, with the government falling apart and no clear path forward. But to fully understand this crisis, you probably have to go back to the last general election in 2018. Historically, Sweden has either been ruled by a centre-right coalition called the Alliance, or a centre-left coalition, sometimes known as the Red-Green Coalition. However, in recent years things have got more complicated, with the rise of the Sweden Democrats. The Sweden Democrats are probably best described as right-wing nationalists. They're anti-immigration, insofar as they want stricter immigration controls, oppose offering permanent residency to asylum seekers, and reject multiculturalism. They're also Eurosceptic. They campaigned for Swexit until 2019, and they want to keep the krona over the euro. As well as that, they occasionally say some controversial stuff about Islam. In 2017, one Sweden Democrat politician said that Muslims weren't completely human, and in 2018, another said, "I hate all Muslims to the extent that I get sick when I see them." Now, it's worth noting that Strid was immediately kicked out of the Sweden Democrats, and the Sweden Democrats insist that their gripe isn't with Islam specifically, but with Islamism and any other extremist ideologies. But we're not going to try and get into a debate about whether the Sweden Democrats are Islamophobic. We're only mentioning it because it's a large part of the reason that other mainstream Swedish parties have refused to go into coalition with them. This became a bit of a problem in the 2010 general election, which was the first time that the Sweden Democrats' vote share topped the minimum threshold of 4%. The Sweden Democrats won 5.7% of the vote that year, awarding them 20 out of the 349 available seats, while the Red-Green Coalition got 156, and the Alliance won the remaining 173 seats, falling just shy of the 175 needed for a majority. The Alliance formed a minority government, which was in practice relatively well functioning because they were only a few seats short of a majority, and could often rely on Green Party MPs for the extra votes. However, the problem got worse in 2014, when the Sweden Democrats won 13% of the vote, giving them 49 seats. This time, the Red Greens won 159 seats, while the Alliance won 141. The Red Greens, without the Left Party, formed a minority government of just 138 seats, 37 shy of majority, making it the smallest government in Swedish history to begin a term. This government was not particularly functional, and actually failed to pass its first budget on December 3rd, 2014. However, after threatening an election and negotiating with the Alliance parties, the Red Greens finally passed their budget on December 27th, with the support of the Alliance parties, who lent their support in return for concessions in other policy areas, like immigration. There's sort of a positive feedback loop going on here. The Sweden Democrats, an anti-establishment party, win enough seats to deny the establishment parties a majority. The establishment parties then refuse to go into a coalition with the Swedish Democrats, leaving them with a minority government. The minority establishment government is ineffective, so people vote for the anti-establishment Swedish Democrats, who get more seats, forcing an even smaller minority government, making the establishment parties look less and less effective. All of this takes us to the most recent election in 2018. The Sweden Democrats won 17.5% of the popular vote this year, leaving them with 62 seats in the Swedish parliament, and again, leaving neither the centre-right nor centre-left with a majority. Over the next 3 months, the Social Democrats, the Moderates, and the Centre Party all tried to form a government with majority support in the parliament, and all failed, in large part because most of the parties were unwilling to rely on the Sweden Democrats for support. The Moderates tried to form an alliance with the Sweden Democrats, but the Centre Party and Liberals refused. After threatening another election, Löfven's Social Democrats finally succeeded, supported by the Greens, with the Liberals, Centre Party and the Left Party all agreeing to abstain from the vote. According to Sweden's constitution, the government just needs more than half of the parliament not to vote against it. So even though only 115 MPs voted for this new government and 153 voted against it, this was enough to get things started. Essentially, Löfven had a minority government, composed of the Social Democrats and Greens, so just 116 seats, while the Liberals, Centre Party and Left Party agreed not to vote down the government as long as they got some sort of influence over policy. This agreement, known as the January Agreement, was, in retrospect, clearly not going to be politically stable. Now, one of the conditions of the January Agreement was to do with rent controls. Essentially, the Liberals and Centre Party wanted to scrap rent controls for new buildings, something the Social Democrats and especially the Greens were very much in favour of. Rent controls are designed to make housing more affordable, but at least according to the Liberals and the Centre Party, mean that fewer new build properties get built in the first place, which they see as the primary cause of Sweden's current housing crisis. Anyway, the Social Democrats eventually gave up and said that if the Liberals and Centre Party would support them, they'd scrap rent controls. The Green Party made clear at the time that they were against this, and actually said that they'd no confidence in the government if they went ahead with it. Nonetheless, the Greens supported the January Agreement anyway, presumably hoping to renegotiate it with the government when it actually came to the relevant legislation. Which brings us to now. On June 8th, a government-commissioned report into rent control legislation was published. Despite the fact that no legislation had even been tabled yet, a week later, the Left Party threatened to bring a no-confidence vote against the government. However, according to the Swedish constitution, you need 35 votes to force a no-confidence vote, and the Left Party only had 27. Now, confusingly, the mainstream opposition parties, the moderates and Christian Democrats, said that they wouldn't table a no-confidence vote because they're in favour of market rents, but if someone else tabled it, then they'd vote against the government. Enter the Sweden Democrats, who are against market rents, very much against the government, and have more than 35 MPs. The Sweden Democrats realised that if the Left Party hated market rents more than voting with the Sweden Democrats, then they'd have a majority against the government. So, the Sweden Democrats tabled the motion of no confidence, and the Left Party did indeed vote against the government. The motion was passed 181 to 109, making Löfven the first Swedish Prime Minister in history to lose a no-confidence vote. Löfven was given a week to either resign or call a snap election, which would have to be held in the next 3 months. If he resigns, then it's up to the Speaker to investigate whether a new government could be formed. It's very possible that Löfven forms a new government, both because he's a good negotiator and because the Left Party probably don't actually want to topple a government that they've been propping up. They just want them to listen a bit more when it comes to rent controls. And because the Liberals and the Green Party are currently both polling below the minimum threshold of 4%, so are desperate to avoid an election. Whatever he decides to do though, it probably won't solve the fundamental problem. If neither the Red Greens nor the Alliance are willing to work with the Sweden Democrats, then they can't expect stable majority governments, at least as long as the Sweden Democrats keep winning seats. Let us know your thoughts though. What do you think will happen next? Chuck your opinions in the comments below. As I said at the start, videos like this are made possible by our Patreon backers. In return for their support, they get a whole variety of perks, from early access to videos, exclusive live events, merch discounts, and more. Find out what you can get and sign up by clicking the link in the description. Anyway, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.